Welcome back to the podcast. In this session, we're going to be speaking about virtual reality paramedic training with Sam Willis. So in the conversation, we want to examine the utility and innovation of virtual reality training as a tool for paramedic practice. So we're going to examine the engagement with virtual reality technology, which areas of education it can support, the reflections from students, virtual reality versus reality in an academic sense, and indeed the assessment process online, and much more. So to do this, I'm speaking with Sam Willis. Sam is a senior paramedic lecturer at Charles Darwin University and indeed the lead for VR-related educational concepts. Sam is also conducting his PhD in this area. Welcome to the podcast, Sam.
Owen, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Sam, I just wondered, can we just start by just asking why VR? What's it add to the process of paramedic education?
Yeah, straight in, eh? Straight in with the big $1 million golden nugget question. Fantastic. So, virtual reality, as you know, is actually not new technology, but the ways that we're using it actually is. And one of the things that underpinned this research was our ability as lecturers and people who are tasked with supporting students was the ability to be able to get our students connected. And it's that connection that was fundamental and really pivotal to this research. And I wanted to use virtual reality because of its ability to literally transform people into a room where there's a sense of presence. Presence meaning that you can actually feel the proximity of another person with you. So in a short answer to your question, it was the ability, the technology ability of the virtual reality to allow students to feel present among themselves as a key support person, as key support for each other.
Absolutely, Sam. And to your point, you can get that proximity, but you can also recreate a lot of artificial environments. So you can sort of test through different modalities, which, like you said, kind of, if you were to search through that through real life experience, it might take you 6 months, it might take you a year, it might take you 2 years to actually put students in that in those environments. But just if you could just maybe speak to how VR learning works. Is there an online avatar with scenarios playing out, or is it more a virtual discussion space? How does it work in reality?
Well, the virtual reality systems can do all of those things that you mentioned, but my unique contribution was it actually wasn't using virtual reality to put students in simulated scenarios, but instead it was the non-technical aspect that basically allows students to develop the critical thinking, the reflective practice, the joined up learning, the emotional well-being, to be able to apply the clinical skills in practice. So what is clear in the evidence is that people and organizations have been using virtual reality in paramedicine for reasons such as teaching students how to triage patients in mass casualty incidents. That's one of the studies that was undertaken by one of the large universities here in Australia. Ambulance services use virtual reality to train their staff how to deal with aggressive patients. But the way I used it was to get students together to implement what's called communities of practice, which is a social learning theory created by social anthropologists Jean Lave and Etienne Wenger. And it was their social learning theory, one of their social learning theories, that actually underpinned the study. So in answer to your question, I didn't use it in the traditional sense of getting students to be able to practice the psychomotor skills, but instead it was a chance to bring students together to connect, reflect, share, learn from each other, reduce the social isolation that we know that students experience while they're out on clinical placements, and to give them also a sense of fun. It was actually the fun aspect that I believe that allowed students to keep coming back time and time again.
So it's more maybe forum based, and so they could discuss things in a forum, and then maybe look at various education endpoints. But Sam, could you maybe speak to your PhD, because your PhD is directly related to virtual reality learning. Could you maybe speak to how it intersects, like the primary, secondary outcomes, what your methodology and sample size is, but fundamentally what you're looking to achieve?
Well, the PhD study was actually a multi-phase study. So it was a mixed method multi-phase study. And in the first phase, I sent out two nationally distributed, well, one was a nationally distributed online survey, and another second survey was sent to to universities in Australia. The purpose of sending the survey to Australia was to identify exactly what the challenges were in preparing and supporting their students for them to enter clinical practice as student paramedics. The second phase, the second part of that same phase, so it was a sub phase, was to ask students across Australia what they saw as the strengths, weaknesses, limitations of the work integrated learning. Because what we do know is that clinical placements or work integrated learning, whatever you want to call it, are phenomenally complex. And the universities themselves find it complex because there's lots of different moving parts, and so do the students. And so the first phase was really focused on that, on what the students and the lecturers thought about the preparation and support of work integrated learning. Then the second phase, which was the major aspect of the study, was to put student paramedics into weekly virtual reality communities of practice. And the topics and the areas that we discussed and that we engaged with were based on the results and the findings from the first phase. So when students reported some of the complex challenges that they experienced, we used that data to feed into the second phase. We very much made it an evidence-based study from the outset. In terms of the data collection techniques, as I just said, there were 2 online surveys, but there was also a face-to-face interviews for the second phase interview participants. And then during the communities of practice, I myself, because it was a mixed method study, I undertook what's called participant observation, which means I was in there as part of the community, observing and being part of the community. And then after the study had concluded, I undertook a single focus group to evaluate the study.
So looking at the external applicability or the external validity of the study, Sam, or indeed the PhD, the reason why I'm keen on asking this is because I think the universities would really benefit from initiatives like this and starting to really engage with, embrace, and integrate technology like this into, like you said, you mentioned social isolation there. That's a key attribute sometimes when people are on placements, and all their friends or their colleagues are in various shift patterns, and they find themselves on their own. But so there's multiple modalities and uses for this technology. But could you maybe speak to the external validity and how maybe other universities could adopt this technology?
Well, the good news is that, as I've said, virtual reality actually isn't a new technology, and most places already have it. And it's interesting because whenever you mention the terms virtual reality, if you're not a tech savvy person, you start to yawn and you switch off, right? Let's be honest there. But I have to tell you, I mean, my experiences of it, you put the goggles on and you're fully immersed in it, and it really is next level, even though it's been around for some time. So because universities generally own this technology, it's already there. So earlier you asked me about whether it's an avatar or how does it work. Behind me on the screen is the platform that I use. So the hardware was an Oculus Quest headset. So that's your Facebook Metaverse Oculus headset. Number 2, by the way, and they've now got 3. So it's already developed already, and that gives you an idea of how quickly this technology evolves. The software was called Spatial IO. And they've got lots of different environments for you to conduct yourself in. So they've got artificial teaching areas, they've got cinema areas with different graphics. And one of the biggest areas that I use, the most popular area I use, that got a lot of really good, strong, rich outputs, was the campfire. So students gathered around the campfire, and it had this campfire in the middle. And because the technology was so sophisticated, you have this technology called proximity software. So as you walk closer to the campfire, the noise of the burning wood gets louder and louder. And likewise, if you walk closer to a person, the talking gets louder and louder. But equally, the further away you are, it gets quieter and quieter. So that has lots of different advantages. If you wanted to take someone to one side and have a private conversation, you could, or if you want to be part of the main group. So in terms of universities being able to use this, I can guarantee you there'll be multiple people in multiple departments who are already using this technology in one way, shape, or another. When I say technology, I mean the hardware, the Oculus. Some have probably got a wide range of Microsoft products like the HoloLens and so on and so forth. So it's already there, probably.
So looking at the gap at the moment, and like you said, there is the technology is pre-existing, so it is in the marketplace already, and you're ready. It's the adaptation of that into the curriculum and into the education. But could you maybe articulate the gap that exists? Because I think fundamentally, when me and you were at university, there's a gap between perceived education and actual practice, physical practice. Going out on an ambulance, learning the trade as a paramedic. Could you maybe speak to how VR sort of closes that gap?
So you've just asked me a question that is like so big. It's like you want anything else? Any other major questions have you got for me? So the theory practice gap phenomenon is one of the most complex aspects of modern education. It's been around for some time and it affects almost every profession and spans almost every country in the world. Because so it's a really good question. It's $1 million question. How do you bridge the theory practice gap? And what we do know is that there's lots of sub gaps. There's lots of aspects within the theory practice gap phenomena that make up the actual problem of the theory practice gap. And for those listeners who don't know what it is, it's the inability to take that cognitive knowledge that we learn through our education and apply it to practice. That's as simple as that. Now, what I've learned through the research and the readings that I've done as part of this aspect of the PhD is that this research can be one part of bridging the theory practice gap. But what we also know is that actually the paramedic mentors are another aspect of the three. So it's multifaceted. So let me give you an example of how this type of research can help to bridge the theory practice gap. So students come into the communities of practice in VR, and it's the technology that keeps it exciting and fun and rewarding, and it makes them want to attend. It's not burdensome on them. It's not labor intensive. They find it fun. And on most occasions, when I put my goggles on and got into the room, the students were in there before me. So it gives you an example of how they're just trying to get into the room. And also, as I stepped into the room and put my goggles on and my avatar formed, I could hear the conversations, and they were already talking about the cases they went to, the things that they saw, the things that they did, the learnings that they developed. So one of my roles as the host of the communities of practice was to help them reflect, to direct questions towards them and give them time to think and create the environment for learning. Then what I did was, and I know I've mentioned social learning theory of communities of practice, but that's only one theory that I applied here. There's all sorts of other theories as well, including phenomenology and action research and action learning. One of the other aspects that I used was from action learning, whereby you actively ask students to take one aspect of the things they've learned and apply it into their practice. And there was evidence that had occurred. But in terms of the limitations of the study, if I was to do this again, I would focus more on that aspect. But the other aspect of that is that it takes time to build the trust and the respect and to get momentum going. So it's not always as simple as, from week one, you couldn't say, take that and apply it to practice, because some of the students had only spent 1 or 2 sessions in practice anyway. So there's a lot of competing things happening here. So the social learning theory of communities of practice, the technology, the highly sophisticated technology, and the action learning were 3 really fundamental parts. When you pull them all together, were one aspect. And then, of course, the mentors then have a role to play when the students get out into placement in supporting that further.
And like you said, Sam, you've got to build the framework of competence, and you've got to build a framework of understanding before there's applicability into practice. You can't just, like you said, have teaching or training, virtual reality training 1 week, and then expect the students to, because there's no context or frame for some of the sort of larger educational concepts. It's building the foundation, and then, like you said, slowly making sure that that's brought through to practice. Could you maybe speak to competence and how you assess competence in a virtual reality space?
Well, the idea of competence, as you'll probably be familiar with, is that you can undertake a certain task in multiple various settings and achieve similar outcomes. And in terms of how we can do that in a virtual reality setting, and it's a really good question that you've asked, because one of the really exciting parts of this project was because I was the participant observer, I was able to observe. what I was observing was competence in their non-technical skills. So, as you know, the technical skills, you can teach a student how to cannulate and give them the knowledge and the access to the tools. But what we're starting to see in contemporary paramedic practice is if they don't have the emotional maturity, the cognitive, the emotional intelligence, the communication skills, the ability to speak up when things are going wrong, the ability to work as a team, the non-technical skills, then the actual technical skills are dangerous and almost not, you almost can't do those skills safely if you don't have situational awareness, ability to communicate. And this project, this study allowed me to be able to directly observe and monitor and assess the non-technical skills of students in an authentic setting. They were talking to each other and they were bonding and they were sharing because there was psychological safety and there was vulnerability, which, as we know, underpins educational experiences. All the literature on psychological safety talks quite heavily about trust and respect of our peers and ourselves. So really good question. And for me, it was really about the non-technical skills more than it was the technical skills.
No, absolutely. And I think non-technical skills are a fundamental part of paramedic practice, in all aspects. But to the guest's point in previous episodes, I think it's based on, and you've notioned towards it as well, having a good blend of both, because actually there needs to be a real base of competent technical skills, and then the non-technical skills to kind of facilitate those technical ones and allow the acquisition of those technical skills. But could you speak to the feedback, Sam, that you're getting from, you've already notioned that students are really keen to engage with this technology. Just on a wider scale, could you speak to the feedback students have given you that have engaged with VR technology?
Yeah, well, the feedback was ongoing because I was observing it and I was listening to the conversations. But in the focus group itself, there were lots of positives. Yes, there were lots of challenges that they found, and predominantly around things like internet connection. And at the beginning of the study, one student reported that they were feeling quite sick, but that's to do with how quick the internet was processing the data, and that type of stuff. But some of the strengths included, you might laugh at some of these. They were able, when they put their goggles on, they felt that their avatars were a representation of themselves. So they didn't have to do their hair, didn't have to do their makeup, didn't have to go outside and park the car. So there were no barriers to their time. It wasn't eating into their time. They didn't feel like they had to do everything they would usually have to do if they had a camera or were going to go and meet face to face with people. And believe it or not, as far as removing barriers goes with virtual reality, with this type of thing, the more barriers you can remove, the better. Students benefited from connecting with their peers, sharing their stories, and there was a really strong sense of emotional and mental well-being and how this supported them. So even outside of the use of the virtual reality, the connection was really, really powerful. The virtual reality allowed them to do things that they couldn't do in other platforms, such as having a sense of presence, using the technology to participate. Now, we know that participation isn't just about physically seeing things and doing things, because you could be a student sitting at the back of the classroom, processing, learning, not communicating, not engaging, but they're still participating. But this showed real participation. It showed all their body language, all their movements. They had a real sense of fun. And when you combine all these factors together, it allowed students to be the best version of themselves, and it removed barriers to learning. And also inside of the technology itself, it had access to a full internet. It had access to images, and it allowed people to create a sense of belonging, which again is fundamental for education. So all in all, there were a lot more pros than there were cons in this research.
No, that's fantastic. Just something you said there, which is really interesting, is I think one thing I forget when you are online is, especially within a maybe a university context is you have an absolute bank of information. So, like you said, if there's an online discussion, a virtual reality discussion, and you want to talk about central cord syndrome, or you want to talk about hemorrhage control, or indeed some concept, you can pull stuff straight away from the
Mm,
from the internet right up there
mm,
for the benefit of the group. And I think there's that blending of information is
mm.
fantastic. Sam, what's the future of in your to your thoughts of virtual reality training?
Well, what I'm observing in the field is that more and more people are coming on board with it, and I genuinely believe you can use it in lots of different ways. And what I would advocate, and if I had to give anybody any advice, it would be to not only see virtual reality as a tool for doing the practical cognitive skills, actually start to use it more in the areas that I've been able to use it in. Don't underestimate the importance of the cognitive skills, the reflective practice, the coming together, the development of autonomy, the ability to demonstrate participation, the non-technical skills. So the technology is already here, and it's getting more and more sophisticated, and it's getting cheaper, it's getting more accessible. And even though I didn't use it for the development of cognitive psychomotor skills, you absolutely can. You can combine all of this stuff together, and it will be interesting to see where it goes, given that VR is now AR and augmented reality is a real thing. You've seen the Apple goggles where people are walking down the streets with them, seeing, let's see where this goes. But the take home message for this question is the technology is here, it exists. There will be people in the university who are all over that space. Do try and find them and knock on their door and see how they can get on board and help you in paramedicine to implement it in your curriculum.
Listen, that's fantastic. And I guess a follow-up question to that would be, how quickly would you integrate it within a curriculum? Would it be something that you'd pause until there was maybe some of the foundational stuff to give it given in pure reality, or would you integrate it quite early on into a course?
You can implement it anywhere, to be honest. I mean, look at the generation of students that we've got coming through the system. People are technological savvy now, and they call it off the shelf technology. And I'm not saying it doesn't take time to set up, but it does. All of my students had different levels of ability to get on board with the technology. So anybody can access it. I do genuinely think you have to have a level of confidence with it. So if I'm speaking to the population of lecturers who are wanting to implement it, spend some time learning about it. Maybe give yourself 2 semesters to play with it while you're doing your job of teaching and developing the curriculum and all that type of stuff. The other good thing about this software that I used was that for those students who maybe they needed a quick break from the technology, maybe their headset wasn't charged, and for those lecturers who maybe students don't have a headset, it's also got a desktop application as well. So you can log in on a screen and still have a high fidelity, high quality experience, but it just isn't immersive. So yeah, you can implement it at any time, I would say.
No, fantastic, fantastic. So I'm just looking at sort of the adoption or indeed the endorsement from pre-hospital bodies or indeed pre-hospital organizations such as AAs or indeed others. Have you seen any endorsements from a national perspective around this innovation at all?
I haven't seen it in the way that I've used it. To be honest, it depends what your intentions are for the endorsement. Because if you think about what the outcomes are educational. And yes, as I've said, you can use them for psychomotor training as well, but I've not seen any endorsements for it. No, it's integratable into the curriculum. So the curriculums usually are accredited.
No, indeed, indeed. And it'd be interesting, even just more local level at university level, if this starts to become something which starts to, as students look at different courses, this is an expectation and indeed something which is written down in the course requirements that there is a certain level of virtual reality engagement within the
Mm,
course, and it's a
mm,
blended approach. And it'd be interesting to see that come into the
mm.
context of a university descriptor for a course.
Especially given that we do have a large online group of students studying, who we have students who are called external students. They study interstate and then they attend campus for their practical sessions. Um, the biggest set of feedback I get from external students is that there is this sense of social isolation and disconnect, even when they come on for the weekly lectures. So it's a real thing. It exists. It's not going away anytime soon. So I genuinely believe this sense of presence that VR can create could be one step to fixing some of those problems there.
No, indeed, indeed. Just finally, Sam, as we're coming to land on the conversation, could you maybe speak to some just take-home points for maybe indeed lecturers or indeed university employees or wider that are thinking of integrating virtual reality within their sort of educational programs?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. My first point would be really around develop an interest in it. It's like anything. If you're not interested, you're not going to do it. So if you have a general curiosity is the buzzword at the moment in education. If you have a curiosity about it, that's a really good starting point. I would say just find some time to just have a look to see what's on the market and see how it's being used. Get on YouTube and take a look. Then go and try and see what your university departments have in terms of VR. A lot of the times they have departments that are really embracing technology. So it's not new. They're probably there. They probably exist and being used by different groups of people. And just if you're going to throw it into the curriculum, just give yourself some time to practice and to test and to test and to test and to test and to work out some of the problems you might face. Like if a student's saying they feel nauseous, what are you going to do? Well, there's a backup plan. There's the online space you can use, the online screen platform. If a student's got poor internet connection, well, there are things around that. Depends on maybe give them advice on where to go and how to find an internet connection. And again, having a plan B. So, and then of course, you become familiar with the technology yourself. Make sure that you have an understanding of, well, if this happens, I'm going to do this, having a plan B. And of course, run it past your managers and your people that you're leading and your teams and your groups and say, look, I want to try this. What are your thoughts? And people might have experience where they say, oh, we tried this last semester. This worked really well. This needed some tweaking. I'll happily get on board with you. Get some support, get some excitement for it. The more people you've got on board, the more excitement you have, the more successful it's going to be.
Listen, that's fantastic. I think what we'll do, Sam, is we'll put links to existing VR platforms within the show notes. We'll also do is put links to Charles Darwin University and indeed the paramedic course within the show notes as well. And if there's anyone with any questions, I'm sure they can reach out to you further. How do people get in touch with you if they do have questions?
They can just email my work emails, and I'm sure I can hand that to yourself.
Fantastic, fantastic. We'll put that in the show notes so people can get in touch if they want to know further. Listen, Sam, it's been fantastic just over the past half an hour, just chatting with you and catching up, and also just hearing about this novel technology, which is really starting to integrate more so within our day-to-day lives. So thank you.